am going to get a little bit of a different perspective, but welcome everybody. You know, they say you always save the best till last. Well, you know what that means? They put the worst first. So, that's all I'm getting. Yeah. Thanks, Sebastian. You know, the newsstand industry has been a real tough thing to deal with over the last decade plus. I mean, retail sales have not been positive for us. And there's a lot of things that contribute to that, from retail space to quality of publication to cover price to many factors. I think it's encouraging that Samir has all these students here because, you know, you're among a room full of people with a tremendous. I'm a PC guy and I got a Mac up here. Okay. I did, and it's not clicking. Oh, that works. There we go. That's better. So see, we all have our challenges. But I want to talk just a few minutes for you students about wisdom, about the wisdom that's in this room, because it's a great amount of wisdom here. And I don't know if you know where wisdom comes from, but it comes from experience. I mean, we've got centuries of experience in this room. And that's just me. But do you know where experience comes from? Poor judgment. I can remember my dad when I was in high school. He was a blue-collar guy, owned his own automobile repair shop, and one Saturday morning, we were just sitting there talking, having donuts and chocolate milk. And my dad started talking to me, as he would occasionally, about integrity. But he also started talking to me about the bad decisions that he had made in his life. And I said, well, Dad, I said, what'd you learn from bad decisions? He says, everything. We learn more from those poor judgments and those bad decisions than we do from the things we do right. Doing them right, you're just doing it right. You're not learning anything. How do you do it better? So that poor judgment is a real high quality for us in this room because it's brought us a lot of wisdom. Just to start with some of the industry information. You know, over 18 years, this industry has gone through some real complex changes. The blue bars are the average cover price since 2000, from $3.30 to nearly $6 today. Big increase. But you can see at the same time that sales efficiency, and by sales efficiency I mean the difference between what we sell and what we've distributed to retail, has dropped from 35% to the all-time low of 24%. So while the cover price at retail has increased, our efficiency at retail has declined. Now, some of that, even us publishers would tell you, is self-inflicted. Because we have this saying in the industry, if you cut that draw, if you cut the amount of product you send to retail, you cut your sale. And there's a certain amount of truth in that. So the model that every publisher has is a little bit different, but still the same when it comes to this particular item. Talk about cover price for a few minutes. 6-8 years ago, a thing hit the market that we call bookazine. You know, when we started saying bookazine, everybody said, what in the world is that? And it was basically high cover price magazines that were perfect bound. They gave the impression of a book, but they were the size of a magazine, and they had a high cover price. Well, that has morphed into a huge part of our retail environment today. You know, today, that average cover price going to $6 is really the result of that bookazine or SIP, special interest publications, which is more of the special interest publications today than it is a bookazine. But it's all high cover price stuff. I mean, $9 to $15.99, $16.99. There's books out there on the retail level that are $24.99, and they sell. The consumer has said, if you give me a good quality, you give me a good product, I'll pay for it. They're savvy consumers. You can see that that $3 to $5.99 range is the majority of our business. But over 3 years, it's declined pretty significantly. Go to far right, $12 and greater. From 10% of market share to 16%. That's not by accident. Publishers are savvy as well. They realize that they have content, and this is the really beautiful thing about the content in those bookazines is it's normally recycled content. It's stuff they've already printed. They've got it in-house. They're just packaging it differently, better, higher quality. Matte covers come on the scene a few years ago. I remember the first time I seen a magazine with a matte cover. It was gorgeous. But our industry is like everybody else. One guy does it and it's successful, and everybody does it. This gives us a 3-year period by quarter of the industry and the bookazines. And while I don't want you to focus on that top line and that blue line, what I want you to really focus on is the bottom line, and that's that red line, because this is total units. Look how consistent the product of $8.99 and greater is in units over 3 years. It's consistent. It's holding its own. Should be telling us something. Don't move everything to $9. That's not what it's telling us. But it's telling us there's life there. There's life in print. And there's life in print when it's quality. When I put this slide together, I was really shocked. Really shocked. 338 titles. 4.5% of all the titles in 2017 that had retail sales represent 80% of the units. There were 7,400 different titles that hit newsstand in 2017. 7,400. 388 of them are 80% of the unit sales. The top 500 titles, 6.7% of those 7,400, 86%. And you get to the top 1,000 titles, it represents 95% of our business. 6,400 titles represent 5%. Everybody just glazed over. That's why I'm the worst. See, they put the worst first. All these numbers and charts. These other guys are going to have to talk about exciting stuff. We talk about display, but I never hear anybody talk about the retail outlet itself. I've been looking at these numbers now for more than 20 years. 2 different lives, but been looking at numbers for 20 years. I went back to a previous life because I saved all that industry trend stuff I did, dating all the way back to 1990. However, I couldn't find any dealer counts for the industry back then because I happened to work for a publisher and I didn't have the universe of numbers. And we didn't have an entity that could give us the universe of numbers at that point like we do with Magnet now. But I did find this number from 2008. There were 159,000 retail outlets in 2008. Today we have about 105. We've dropped 34%. Look at that top line. Number of convenience stores. Now, we'll have to tell you, back then, is those convenience stores represent a lot of magazine sales, but you know what the majority of those sales were? Sophisticates. Pardon me? Playboy, Hustler. Liz. The editor parents shouldn't answer that question. Wholesome. She's a wholesome. The editor parent. She doesn't know what that is. That's all right. It's all right. Liz. Yes. I mean, back then it wasn't even soft porn. It was pretty hardcore stuff. Any other questions? Trying to get you off the hook, Liz. The other thing that's interesting in this slide that came to light for me was I was also looking at the number of releases in a year, the number of issues actually that hit newsstands. In 2015, there were 55,000 issues that hit newsstand. 55,000. 2016, 62,000. 2017, 68,000 issues. So anybody who says that it's dead, why are we growing like that? Why do we have more issues? Why is more hitting the newsstand? We're getting more diversified. Our content's getting better. Our quality's getting better. Our price is going up. I think it's pretty good shape for all intents and purposes. It's changing. It's changing. But we're good. We're okay. Here's an example. You know, not all titles are created equal. We have two women's worlds here. You see the difference by looking at them just real quick? Which issue sold the most? It's a trick question. That flat belly soup sold 800,000 units for $1.6 million in retail sales. But the one on the left sold 700,000 units, $2.1 million in sales. Cover price. The one on the left was a special. Lower price special than what I showed you in that illustration earlier, but it's a special. It's content that's been recycled at a higher cover price, more pagination, consumer realizing it, but look what it sold. Look what it did to retail. Not all titles are created equal. Highest retail sales issues. 2.4 million on the right, 2.4 million on the left. Anybody have any idea which sold on the right?
Is it a blank cover?
Okay. And the one on the right, here's the interesting thing. The one on the right did it with 50% fewer dealers, 70% fewer copies distributed. Will, you knew that. See any similarities? You got the gains on both covers, but that cover of people, royal family. Why does the royal family sell so much product? Who in here follows the royal family? It's just amazing. Or they probably bought that from Matt Lauer's story. Highest unit sales. I'm only showing this illustration because I thought it was just very unique. The flat belly, that was the #1 selling issue in all of 2017. It sold more copies than any other issue of any magazine, 800,000 units. I come from a world, I started to work for the National Enquirer. Now we know them as American Media. When I went to work for the National Enquirer was selling 5 million copies a week. They're lucky to sell 250,000 today. But there is still a celebrity need out there. There's this savoring appetite for celebrities. Look at the difference there here, though. 800,000, 1.6, 470,000, 2.8 million. $5.99 versus $1.99. I already told you there were 7,400 bypads or titles in volume in 2017. Just some real quick facts. 100 of the top 500 titles produced increased unit sales in 2017. 100. There are titles doing well. 72 of those had cover prices over $8.99. There's a market for it. 240 of the top 1,000 titles had increased sales. Of those 240, nearly 18% of the top 1,000 retail volume. And then one final point, the top 10 chains represent 58% of the top retail volume. And I don't think this list has changed in 10 years. I think it's the same retailers. This is in alphabetical order because retailers don't want to be noted for where they stand in the industry. So here's the question. Leaders think and talk about solutions. Followers think and talk about the problems. What are you talking about? Thank you.
Ray.
Yes, sir.
I'm going to ask you a question I don't think you can answer.
Okay.
But
I like those kind of questions.
I need to throw it on the table.
Yes, sir.
What about the independents that are, self-distributed? There are thousands of titles that successful, maybe, that we're unaware of. Do you know any data on?
I don't have any data on those, Bo, but I know they represent less than 1% of the volume. In talking to publishers, because I get all of their numbers and I have all of my numbers, and it's less than 1% of total volume. It's really small.
That's a good answer.
Okay.
Slide, that's all.
Anything else while they're setting up? Good.
Oh, keep it going, Bo.
No, I'm kidding.
That's Will's, so you don't want that one. You had the right one, it's Will's.
Yeah, I told you.
Okay, so
Any person who gets to talk
there you
about
go,
numbers
just gotta get to one.
Yeah,
put you to sleep.
There you go.
Will just-
there you go.
Thanks, Tony.
Thank you, Liz.
Afternoon, everybody. No sleeping. No sleeping. I'm going to call you out and say, hey, what's going on here? Thanks for letting us present today about the newsstand. And really what we're talking about here is that place where we actually sell newsstand copies, or single copy, as some people call it. We can call it the printoverse, part of the printoverse, as we referred to earlier. So this is where we actually have consumers make a decision to come up and grab a copy and take that home. That's the environment that I'm talking about. Just for a little background here, my history is I worked for a retailer for about 35 years. I also started when I was 12. So that's where my background comes from, and that's what I love. I love retail, and I actually happen to love magazines. And what we're talking about is the intersection of those two places. So let's talk a little bit about where we are today and maybe paint a picture of where we think we can go. So, as Ray noted, I think, magazines are challenged today, that's for sure. In retail, in newsstand, they are definitely challenged. What I'm going to talk about here is mainly, let's focus on mass grocery drugs, so the Walmarts, the CVS's, the local grocery stores that you know about. That's kind of the environment I'm talking about. And please note that there are definitely exceptions. Ray kind of alluded to that. We have retailers that don't go against the norm. They're doing extremely well. There's some that are really terrible, but there's some that are doing extremely well. And there's also titles that run to the exception. So we're kind of talking the average here. So keep that in mind as we go through this. And certainly if you thought about bookstores, Barnes & Noble, terminals, they're going to run a little bit different than the picture that I'm going to talk about here. So we talked about sales, they're not good. And as soon as you get to that place, all of a sudden there's a chicken or the egg discussion that comes in here. And that's what happens when you talk about what's happening to space. Well, space we know is down. And you could say, well, is that because sales are down, or are sales down because of the space? And I think the answer to that is yes. It's a little bit of both, and depending on who you talk to, you're going to get a little bit different answers. So the quantity of space, so how big are those magazine displays in stores? We know that they're down. They definitely are down. And we know that the number of pockets, or the number of times you're going to see a magazine on a checkout, that's also down. So again, it's a question of what came first. But one thing I will tell you is, I know for sure, less space will equal less sale. So sometimes it could be a little bit of a snowball here that we're talking about. On top of this, we have a quality of space issue. So that is where do we find these magazines in the stores? Is it, when you walk in the front door? How many places when you walk in the front door, you're going to run smack into a magazine display? None. None. That's always been an issue. But in today's environment, because we, and I'll get into this in a second, we pretty much would put a magazine anywhere anybody would give us any space for. We'd take it. We would use that. But now we're in an environment in retail, again, we'll chat about this, that environment's changing. We have to have a better reason to choose the spaces that we want to go into. So there's an old reason for that. And the same thing's happening in the mainline, where the quality of space where that display is located sometimes can be in a back corner where nobody knows where that is. And here's what I'm talking about. This is an example. The upper picture is a picture from 2003. It was a mainline location in a company I used to work for. It was right up front, right opposite the registers. You can see the size of that main line. It was over 60 feet long, and there was books in the center, and there was a book table. It was absolutely huge, and you could not miss it. The lower picture is the same company in its current magazine display last week. Now, you may not know where that is because it's behind and up against this wall. This is the magazine display, right here. Just so happens to be behind toys, behind HBC, and the registers are actually located over here. So it's actually behind the registers. So if you want a magazine from the main line in this store, it's going to be tough. Guarantee you that has an effect on sales. No question about it. Any good retailer will tell you that. Location, location, location. It makes a big difference. So we're fighting that battle today. And when you look at the front end, there's a lot of reasons for that. One of those is this new competition. When I talk about competition, I'm talking about people vying for space. In retail today, everybody wants to be on the front end. You go back 15 years ago, it was magazines everywhere. And then we got some soda coolers, and then we got some candy, and then we got chickens, perishable, you name it, beef jerky. It's all on the front end. Everybody wants to be there. Everybody's fighting for that space. And it's a very, very difficult space to win. And what are these guys coming in with in a lot of cases? A big check. And in many cases for retailers, that's what they win on. Now that environment's changing a little bit. I'm glad to say I think that's going to change based on where retail is today, but it's still a battle that we have to fight. So let's talk about just the overall retail environment, not necessarily magazines, but just the environment that we're operating in. So the consumers and their buying habits, they certainly have changed. And retail has to cope with this new reality. All retail. It's definitely changed. Trips, believe it or not, means the number of times that consumers come into a store is actually up. There's actually more trips being taken to stores. The problem that most retailers have is the basket size, the amount of product that they're buying, is down. That's not a good situation, because if you're going to have to service more trips, that means it's going to take more labor. It's not a good thing. What they really want to make sure they get is the number of trips up and the number of basket size up. They're looking for that good combo. And that's not an easy battle. So what that does happen is that you're going to find retailers more interested in building loyalty, so they make sure when a customer does make a trip that they actually are going to come back to their store. So retailers end up being very, very loyalty focused. And that's not easy. If you looked at overall, we do a lot of work with Kantar Retail, and I'm going to have a few slides from up in my presentation. But what they're noting is that the number of actually retailers that are shopped, now we're talking physical bricks and mortar retail here, the actual number of outlets that are shopped are down. So they're not making it to as many different stores as they used to. It went from about 12 to about 9. So it's gone down just a little bit. So they're not shopping in as many places as they used to. So that's part of the evolution that retail is dealing with today. The other part of it is this whole technology bit. So technology is everywhere in retail, and they're trying to figure out how to make use of it the best. It is changing rapidly, and if you think about a big supermarket operator, for instance, right, and you look at the number of stores they have, and you think about the number of checkouts that you remember seeing in the store, think about what a technology shift can do from a capital cost perspective. It's real expensive to make change. Lots of stores. Walmart has 4,700 stores. Think about a technology change coming to play in that. It's expensive. So they're very hesitant to make a new move, but at the same time, they know they got to make a move. Remember RFID tags? Anybody know what that is? RFID?
Radio frequency identification.
There you go. Thought it was going to be the answer to everything. Everything was going to have its own little special chip in that. So everything would have its identifier, and we could control that. Never happened. Some people put it in. Walmart actually put it in at the back door to keep track of the pallets of product that was going in and out, had it in the warehouse. But it hasn't really caught on. Not to say it won't come back. It could. Beacon technology. Everybody was talking about beacons 4 or 5 years ago. Then it just kind of went away. And now it's back. So it's really hard to know in this technological universe what's actually going to happen. And it makes that environment for retailers kind of really skittish. They know they've got to do it, but it's a hard place to operate. And that's where retail is today. And there's also this ramp up of competitors. You've heard of Lidl, you've heard of Aldi. That's just the tip of the iceberg. You think about this environment where retail is challenged. You got these operators actually want to come in and play here? Wow. That says something. And at the same time, there's been a lot of consolidation in retail. So a lot of folks really trying to condense their operations, be more efficient. Think about Kroger. They've bought a lot of different chains. Think about the chains that have gone away over time. A lot of big chains, Super Value, gone. Safeway, really, gone. That was a huge chain now. And Albertsons, Vons, big names that have kind of consolidated as this new, trying to figure out how to operate in this universe happens. This is what's happened to retailers. And on top of that, you've got the consolidation. You also have a shift in what's going on with the size of the store. So when I started, we were building 70,000 square foot stores, and that was huge, absolutely huge at the time, back around 1997, 98, big stores. Moved that up to about 125, 250,000. I think in the case of a Walmart, really big stores. Now everybody's talking about way too big. We need to narrow that down. We've got to get our space focused. And you think about the environment that we operate in, what we're used to operate in, and what we grew up in is big stores, lots of space. That's all changing. Just as an example of the challenge that I think that retail is facing, this is a slide that Kantar provided to us. And if you look on the left side, they're talking about what percentage of goods are actually spent on services versus product. So the actual spend percentage, it used to be 46% of goods, of your spend were spent on goods. That's that bottom line. That's dropped to 32%, with 68% of the spend that consumers spend going to services. So think about that shift from a retailer's perspective is those dollars that I used to have a higher percentage that's now gone away. Is there some business there? Is there something that I can actually attack? Is that an opportunity for me? And then combine with that, on the right, you'll see what's happening where people try to combine online the goods and services. And how does that threaten bricks and mortar retail today? That makes it very difficult for a retailer to figure out where they're going to go taking a step forward. And they have to shift or change what their priorities are in terms of what they're looking at. So, in that shift, they have to, one, be consumer driven. They've got to know where that consumer is going. They believe now that if you want to do something in the store, you got to tell me where that customer is, because that's what I'm all about, the customer. Remember I talked about loyalty and making sure that they could build that loyalty? That's going to be so critical in this new world. And in order to do that, they got to talk about the customer. For the people in the room, maybe we should think about that as reader. But really what that retailer is talking about is customer, and that's customer first all the time. They have to keep their costs under control because in this new world, the price is almost a given. if you want to sell this item, you're going to have to be in this ballpark because I can find out what the price is. I can no longer be out in left field. There's very little room to make money on these lower driven volume items because the price is known. So in that environment, they've got to really keep their costs down. It's very hard to make money. And as I mentioned before, they're going to be competing for loyalty. They really want to build those trips. They want to build the basket. They have to be trend sensitive, meaning if there's a new, if all of a sudden tomatoes that are steamed are hot, they've got to make sure that they're sensitive to that and they go after that item. If they don't have those, they're going to lose. They're going to lose a customer. They cannot afford to lose a customer. In grocery, they often talk about the margins for profit as being somewhere in 2 or 3%. If you lose a customer, it can have a dramatic effect on your bottom line. There just isn't the room. So they're going to be trend sensitive, and they will overreact. They'll be making these changes quick. They're going to rationalize and redistribute space. They're going to make changes in the store. You'll see departments come and go. If you look at the large operators in supermarkets, you'll see that they shifted today to all these perishable products in many cases. So in my neck of the woods, the Wegmans has a huge presence for perishable foods and prepared. So now they have chefs in the store. I mean, you don't have to go back too far. Well, that was just a ridiculous thought. Not today. They're everywhere. Think about pharmacies. Think about the growth of pharmacy in a retail chain, how that's changed over time. And that's all about retailers trying to react to where consumers are going, making sure they have what consumers want. Looking at the Amazon model, what they're faced with, they're looking to simplify their operation. They really want to make sure that they've removed the barriers to coming in their store. And they're going to continue to do that. If they see a barrier, they're going to try to attack it because they believe they're always going to be competing with Amazon from here on out. And the purchase of Whole Foods by Amazon certainly makes that competition very, very visible for a retailer. They've got to be on their game. They know it's coming. If you think about the technology side and you think about trying to remove barriers, I just read this article the other day where Kroger was instituting scan and go. So basically where consumers come into the store, they've got a little scanner. When they go through the lines, they basically take the item, scan it, put it in their basket, scan it, put it in their basket. So when you go to the checkout, I just go. I just walk through. And that's the more complicated version. In the Amazon Go store, you just go. It's already been checked out. So think about, from our standpoint, what does that do for us? That means at some point in time, if this actually takes hold, the checkouts are gone. There is no place for that. It's going to go. At some point in time, it's going to go. And the largest driver that's going to be is because the front end is the highest cost driver of any retailer. The labor that they have on the front end, the technology that they have on the front end is extremely expensive. And if they can figure out a way to get that down, it's going to be gone. Something that we will be dealing with going forward. So I just try to paint a picture that retail is complex, that you have retailers that are really focused on a lot of things, trying to figure out where this environment is and where retail is going and where the consumers are going. So they've got, their mind is on that consumer and they're really ready and they're really worried. That's the environment that we step into. But let's just take a look back over our shoulder. Let's look at, back in the 60s, the only two magazines you can find in retail were Family Circle and Women's Day. That was it. In some stores, you couldn't find those. As I was talking to Ray, eventually we got Star and Enquirer, I think, made it to there, and what was the other two? And TV Guide, right? And TV Guide. And then eventually People came. Then in the 70s, the industry invented the retail display allowance, which basically was a way for retailers to make more money. And retailers love money. I guarantee you that. And that started to open up some doors. And that just so happened to be at the same time when bricks and mortar started going through this rapid expansion. Lots of stores, think Walmart. Think about the expansion of Walmart that went from a small chain to it's everywhere. It was rapid and they were big, and this all happened. And if you look at all these stores, Target, Costco, there was just retail boxes everywhere, and they were big, and they were doing volume. It was amazing. Drugstores on every corner, I'm sure you've heard that term. So we had this category that was giving them money in a retail situation that was looking for things to fill those stores. Obviously, we still, back then, we had great appeal with consumers. I mean, magazines were selling like crazy. So we were poised for that growth. We were getting checkouts everywhere. We were getting main lines that were huge, like the one I started the presentation off with. That was not that terribly uncommon. We were in good shape in retail. This is what I call how retailers viewed this back then. It was the best category ever. Magazines are absolutely fantastic. You know what? We'll bring it in for you, Mr. Retailer. We'll take it out. We'll provide the fixtures. We'll go anywhere you tell us. You want us to go in the back room? We'll go there. We don't care. Any place, we can take that space and we can make it work. And actually, the economics did work. Were all spaces equal? No, but we could make it work. Very, very, very profitable. And once a quarter, Mr. Retailer, we're going to bring you an extra check. So yes, you're making a lot of money, and oh, by the way, and here's some more. And the retailer says, oh, thank you, this is great. I don't have to do a damn thing, and you're just bringing me money. This is great. I don't have to worry about taking it out. It's guaranteed sale. This thing is awesome. You don't have to do anything except breaking the dollars. And then came the 1995 consolidation, where wholesalers consolidated. And what happened as a result of that is they even made more money. And the check they bought every quarter was even bigger. So retailers were absolutely in love with this category from a profit standpoint. It was absolutely fantastic. There's nothing wrong with that. There really isn't anything wrong with that picture, unless you think about where we are today. So let's talk about how retailers viewed that at the time. We were a transactional category. Retailers were very engaged with the dollars that we had, but passion around the product was rare. And I know there's exceptions to this, but the involvement with what it was we were actually selling was hard to find because it wasn't necessary, it wasn't required. Retailers liked the fact that they didn't have to be involved. That was a real selling point for the category. We took care of it. That was great at the time. But we did have some problems. We started to get this somewhere in the 2000s where they just found it a little bit confusing. The category didn't make any sense. It didn't fit their retail perspective. So why can't I get more TV Guide? At the time, we would sell out. I mean, sell-throughs on TV Guide, Ray, do you know this one? Was it somewhere in the 70 or 80% range?
Oh, over 90%.
Over 90% for TV Guide. So I can remember going into a store and the store manager come up to me and say, I don't have any TV Guide. And I go back to the publisher and say, I need more TV Guide. And say, I can't give you any more. Well, I'm asking for more. I want to buy more. You can't have it. Why not? Because if I sell you more, I'll lose money. And from a retailer perspective, they're going, that makes absolutely no sense. So in that situation, they didn't quite get the category. And they would ask questions like, why so many titles? What's this about the cards falling out on the floor? Why do you have to return so many? And you're going to shred all these returns? I don't get it. I really don't get it. So there was a lot of confusion about the category from a retail perspective, but that's all right. Just send me the check. I'll be fine. I can deal with it. It's all right. So when you think about the perfect storm, as I like to call it, for the category, we have our sales softening. We've got Amazon now coming up and being everywhere. Books and newspapers first, they took the first downturn in the publication category. Magazines actually held up for a little while. People asked, is print dead? That same question, and certainly you could find that everywhere. It was certainly publicized all over the place. The advertising change that hit the product actually made the product smaller in many cases, so the whole price-value relationship for some people was hard to understand. And retailers were challenged. So at a time when retailers are under pressure, all of these things are happening and they start to ask questions. Not great. So think about, let's break the cycle. Maybe there's a double rainbow out there for us. I think if we can understand that retail consumer of magazines and share those consumer insights, if we really want to break into where retail is today, I think this is going to be required. Find a way to move toward a strategic relationship outside of that transactional business that we talk about. Know the retail marketplace. We've spent a lot of time at MBR trying to bring in retail experts like Kantar to help educate ourselves about the business and what's going on at retail. It's going to be important for us to understand what's going on in the marketplace. And then let's look at those opportunities to figure out where retailers are going and see how we align. How can we align our product and our category with what retailers want? Because in this market that I described where retailers are under a lot of pressure, it's going to be hard to get attention unless we try to form that strategic relationship. Simplify the category, remove barriers, look at the supply chain, talk about profitability. That's still going to be important. Things like we did with SBT, which basically we pay for what scans at the front end, that's a big deal to retailers. It took a lot of barriers out from in terms of a complexity of operation. We need to be able to do those things. But also, speak their language. How many here know what a biped is? You know what a biped is? Okay, everybody in the industry knows what a biped is. A biped is basically, anybody know what a G-tin is? Anybody know what a G-tin is? A G-tin and a biped essentially are the same thing, a UPC. Everybody knows what a UPC is. But if you go into a retailer and you say biped, which is a critical piece of the operation to our business today, you say biped, retailers don't know what the hell you're talking about. They have no idea. So finding how to speak their language is going to be critical as we're trying to win them over onto our side and find ways to do business together. And for consumers, figure out ways to make it easy to shop. Break the cycle. Listen to James talking about the S-curves yesterday, so I'm going to be a little bit careful on this, but this is a Kantar slide as well over here on the right, where they project that in 2022, over 80% of retail sales will still be done in bricks and mortar, still done in a physical building. And if you think about where the attention is right now on digital, that doesn't quite add up. Now, the growth side, where the business is growing, is on the digital side. But even in this year and next year, we're still projecting a base growth in bricks and mortar retail sales, like 1.1 to 1.5%. It's still growing. It's a big, big business. But my observation is, I don't think we believe it as an industry. We're kind of walking away from that retail sale. Anybody have any idea how many consumers Walmart gets on an average week? 200 million. 200 million consumers in Walmart stores every week on average. That's a lot of eyeballs. That's a lot of opportunity to take care of. Let's apply some what-if thinking. One of the things we did at MBR is we tried to provide some guidance for the industry about how do we break out of this. Well, let's look at some of the assets that we have in publishing. Let's talk about the content. Let's talk about our consumers. Let's talk about our readers and say, well, what if? What if we got out of this transactional, let's sell something, make $5, put it in our pocket. Let's talk about engaging with that consumer in retail as a unique environment. It is unique. In many cases, the products that are being advertised in the publications that we're talking about, that exists in that store. So how do we look at that and see that as being a unique opportunity? The list is endless in terms of thinking outside the box. Promote the category. We are very much alive. There is plenty of opportunity. Invest in retail. We got to do consumer research. We have to do retail research. We have to talk about what our product uniquely means in that retail environment. Leverage that content that we're talking about. Try new approaches. Try new things. Fail. But love impulse, but move toward a planned purchase wherever possible. We've got our foot in the door with retailers because we've got a great category in the stores today. We have to make sure that door doesn't get closed on it and make sure that we keep moving forward with this category in retail. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Jerry. Next up is Dave Forsman, who is the EVP of Sales for the News Group, TNG, I think the largest wholesaler in the United States, of which I think two left, right?
Thereabouts.
FYI, we are going to be doing a Q&A after our presenters, so if you have questions, we will definitely get to them, and we encourage them. Thanks.
Good afternoon, and Samir, thank you again for having us. TNG is glad to be a part of this. It's been a year or two since I've been here. It's great to be back at a college campus. There's a lot of optimism, energy, excitement, and beautiful people. So what's not to like? So thank you for having me. At TNG, great job, Jerry. Excellent retail knowledge. If anybody has any questions, Jerry knows a lot about retail, and Ray's a data guy that knows a lot about it, and we've got Will coming up after me. But at TNG, our tagline is we move products to move business forward. We're a magazine wholesale distribution company in name. I guess that's how you describe us. But we have very humble beginnings. We're owned by a gentleman named Jim Pattison. You can Google Jim Pattison. He's a Canadian. He lives in Vancouver, British Columbia. In 1961, at the age of 33, he bought a car dealership, a Pontiac Buick dealership with 3 gas pumps in downtown Vancouver. In addition to that, he launched a Pattison lease business to lease the cars that he was going to sell at this dealership. And there was an old sign up behind the dealership that it was run down, and he took over and created Pattison Outdoor, which today is one of the largest, if not the largest, outdoor sign company in Canada. If you ever go to Toronto or Vancouver, you'll see Pattison Outdoor all over the place. So that's 1961, very humble beginnings to this. And we operate in 8 verticals. We have 30 operating divisions. We report 3 numbers. Our parent company does. We're very private. We have no private equity involvement. The company is very well capitalized. Our annual sales in the bottom there, $10.1 billion. We operate in 605 locations worldwide, and we have about 45,000 employees. Those results do not include Canfor, which is Canadian Forest Products Company. We're a large shareholder in Canfor. It's publicly traded. So that's not included in the $10.1 billion. Canfor is the 2nd largest wood products company in North America. They sell lumber to Home Depot and Lowe's. If you've ever seen lumber in those 2 stores, you'll see the Canfor logo. We have West Shore Terminals, the largest coal export terminal in Western North America. We own the Guinness Book of World Records. We own Ripley's, believe it or not. Believe it or not. We own supermarkets. So we know the retail game pretty well. We own Comag Marketing Group, which is a national distributor of magazines. So they bill magazines from publishers to TNG. We own broadcast radio and television stations all over Canada. We got our start in auto. We're big into auto today. You'll notice in auto a lot of foreign plates on there, not a lot of domestic U.S. dealerships. We're the largest John Deere dealer in Canada, primarily in the prairies. Some of these combines sell for up to $1 million, $2 million a unit. Some customers spend $20 million a year on equipment with John Deere in Canada with TNG or JPG. So Canadian Fishing Company harvests about 30% of all the wild sockeye salmon in North America. So if you ate sockeye salmon, chances are 30% came from our company, which is pretty cool. We're in wine, we're in fruit snacks, all kinds of various holdings, so quite large. TNG, so we're an operating division of the Jim Pattison Group. We have about 13,000 employees. Many of those are part-time, so about 10,000 are part-time. Those part-time numbers are not included in the parent company statistics. We deliver about 1.7 billion units to retail annually. We have about 3.9 million store assignments annually. We drive halfway to Mars. I think it's 35 million miles to Mars. So every year we drive halfway to Mars with our trucks. We can conduct a number of retailer audits, about 1.1 million a year. We have 2 million square feet of warehouse space across North America. We operate in the US and Canada. And ironically, we do loads of fish for our Ripley's has aquariums. There's one in South Carolina, there's one in Toronto, Canada. And funny story, Jimmy was flying an octopus on his private airplane, and the octopus escaped and came down the aisle towards the pilots. So that was the last time we delivered octopus on our private aircraft. Now we do it on TNG trucks, and it's much more effective. We can lock them up, actually. We always have challenges every day, every year. We wake up and face a $50 to $70 million top-line revenue loss. So next year when we wake up, that's going to be the reality that we live in as TNG, and it's a challenge, a big challenge. We always look out 5 years to forecast where we think the business is going to go. When anybody looks at numbers, I think it's important to put some context in the numbers. And the 2 red stars are critical. In 2009, Anderson News Company exited the magazine wholesale distribution business, left Walmart without product for a number of days. Same thing happened in 2014 when Source Interlink exited the business. And there's been a number of other business cessations that have occurred. It's stabilized somewhat, but as of about 60 days ago, we had another one that exited the business. So a lot of change occurring, but a lot of noise behind these numbers when you look at it on a 20-year trend line. Our share of market's about 75% in the US, 56% in Canada, so we're a fairly large company. There are 2 significant players in the US. T&G has a number of limited partners. We roll up into our number. Hudson Wholesale is another big operator in the northeastern United States. From basically Northern Virginia to Maine is where they operate. So to get a magazine out, Ingrid Jacobson is our procurement person, and it looks pretty easy on the surface, but there's a number of things that we do behind the scenes that get pretty complicated very quickly. So we have a full team of category managers in Atlanta, Georgia, that decide right title, right store, right category, right quantity. We manage the front-end planograms for about 80% of the retailers in the US, so that's a big part of the business, make sure the right title has the right pocket at checkout. We do promotions, coordinate promotions for retailers and for our publisher friends. We do a lot of work on distribution activity. We're developing our proprietary distribution system called Drive right now, which is going to be, we think, very forward-thinking and cutting edge. We do non-periodical product replenishment through this category, which is a big and growing part of our business. UPC management, Sherry mentioned SPT. So SPT is you don't get paid for the product until it goes over the register at a retailer. About 80% of our business today is conducted through scan-based trading, which is a big number, so you have to make sure the UPC, retail, and cost is set up in the retailer system so you get paid for the product so that everything flows the way it should. We have a complete customer account management CRM system that we track through this department. We have specialty and traditional retail, and we're getting into international magazines in a big, big way at T&G. And then we do a lot of analytics through this department. So there are a lot of moving parts to get a magazine from production to retailer selling space. We've had some good success stories, and we believe that content is king and is where everything needs to start. We love Magnolia Journal. That magazine's been a really, really great product for us to distribute. Walmart loves the title, regional players, national players. It's a great product, and it's selling quite well at newsstand. They're also from Texas, which is where I live, so we get behind Jip and Joanne anytime we can. Pioneer Women launched as a Walmart exclusive, and the magazine is now distributed widely beyond Walmart. Highly successful from Will's group over here. We're very excited with Pioneer Women, some of the numbers we're seeing out of that. We have a rural wedding coming up in less than 60 days in May, and we have retailers getting behind the royal wedding like we've never seen before. We're going to connect with bakeries. We're going to have wedding cakes. We're going to have dresses. We're going to have displays. We think that the royal wedding could be our Prince of 2016 in 2018. Prince was big for us back then. So we're behind the royal wedding. We really are optimistic on the results we're going to see out of the royal wedding. Per retails are up, a lot of good content. We're all over that one. And then we do publishing events quite well at T&G. This is the Houston Astros when they won the World Championship. The Chicago Cubs was big. Anytime we have a celebrity, unfortunate celebrity death or occurrence, we are fast to market and we get behind those events very, very quickly. So that's an important part of some of our success stories that we're seeing. But content is absolutely king, and we have nothing to do with creating the content. Our job is to get it out to retail and display it correctly. But in this case, we did have something to do with the content, and my line's blurred across the top a little bit. But I live near San Antonio, Texas, and they have a phrase down there that local es muy bien. And when you talk about local or regional, this is an example. How many people have heard of Selena? Raise your hands. Wow. So I'm impressed. Okay. So Selena was, unfortunately, was murdered by her manager about 23 years ago in Corpus Christi, Texas. It's the 25th year of her historic Grammy win. I was reading the newspaper in San Antonio. H-E-B had this bag on the left. It's a green reusable shopping bag. They sold them for $2. They sold out in 2 hours at all of H-E-B. On eBay, they went to $50 within about 4 hours. You could buy this same bag that you could have bought for $2 4 hours ago for $50. And then we have a convenience store chain in Texas that's doing collector mugs with Selena's image on the mugs, which are selling out as well. So crazy idea, but why don't we get Topics Media, who's a good friend of our company, we do a lot of work with Topics, to create a Selena magazine, branded Newsweek, that we can sell at retail. And H-E-B has just called us up and said they wanted to take a big position on this product. So we're not only going to sell this in Texas, but we think certain markets of Los Angeles, Chicago, even Arkansas, where there's a lot of Hispanic people living and working. We think this is going to be an absolute, it's going on sale in 2 weeks, and we're very excited. So I think the lesson that we learned from this is that with the right content, retailers will absolutely jump in line, and they had success, obviously, with the green bag, but if we have the content and we can go to retail, we can get unbelievable positioning, display, and support with some of our biggest customers. So it's very exciting. I run the sales team for T&G. I talked about basically, I have 3 areas of responsibility. I manage a team of about 30 across the country. I have 2 people involved with front-end management. So we design, we get manufactured, and we install checkout displays. Magazines today at T&G, about 65% are sold from checkout, and the balance from the inline or mainline display. So checkout is critical. We have a team deployed on that, and I also manage the T&G website and our CRM module at T&G. We just updated our website. We encourage everybody to have a look, and hopefully it works on mobile, which it should. We have a lot of seasoned professionals. So our average tenure on the sales team is about 25 years of newsstand experience. That's a long time. We have many touch points with the retailers. We talk to them every week, every month. We conduct formal business reviews. With frequency, we coordinate publishing summits. We've had one at Kroger recently. We're doing with Meijer next week. We've done with the H-E-B in the past, with big, large chains. And then we have, people from all different backgrounds. There's been a lot of consolidation, so we've picked up a lot of really good people from the industry at T&G. Here's a look at our top customers. It's spilled across a little bit, but basically you see our top 10 customers there. For the top 5, we are exclusive, meaning T&G is the only supplier of periodicals to those retailers: Barnes & Noble, Kroger, Albertsons, and Publix. The headquarters city, the class of trade, whether mass merch, bookstore, grocery, airport terminal, drug, dollar, etc. No convenience stores you'll see in that top 10 ranking. And really, convenience stores today aren't even a factor in the magazine business for T&G. And then we have whether they're a traditional retailer or a specialty retailer inside of our systems at T&G. The bright spot, we acquired Ingram about middle of last year, first part of last year. That's a bookstore chain. We think their business is going to grow for a couple of reasons. They're not touching space, downsizing space. And Toys R Us just went out and sold a lot of children's books, which is going to, we believe, bring a lot of traffic to Barnes & Noble. And that business is really quite strong. We're excited about that customer. Dollar General has 14,500 stores. Every week we receive by Wednesday morning weekly frequency titles. In 95% of their stores by Friday night, we have them all delivered to every 14,500 Dollar General. So we are a very well-oiled machine here at T&G, able to do things very quickly. This is interesting. So the banner logos you see are T&G. Those are distribution centers. If it has a red line underneath it, it's one of our limited partners. We have 15 across the country, just as T&G. And then I have the depot locations in dots across the country, whether it's for us or our partners. And this to give you kind of an idea of our retail base, it's pretty large. So those are all the green dots of traditional Walmart, Kroger, Albertsons, Publix, Safeway retailers that we supply today from all our distribution centers. Then I later in our specialty business, so this would be Dollar General, Barnes & Noble, Home Depot, Lowe's Building Supply, Bass Pro Shops, you name it, quite a few specialty retailers we do business with. And then I layered in on top of that the Barnes & Noble business we picked up last year. And you can see it's primarily East and West Coast, a little bit down in the South in Texas and Florida. But that's a big part of our business as well. So that's our footprint of retail, includes Alaska and Hawaii. I didn't show Canada in this pitch because picture because it's a different division of our company. Logistics, so just some basic statistics on logistics. We deliver about 280,000 truckloads of goods annually, 70,000 locations weekly. We have about 1,000 trucks. There are 2 versions, the large truck on the right for long haul and the shorter, smaller truck for store delivery. And then we just invested in a very significant warehouse management system from JDA, state of the art, and it allows us to track and manage products throughout our system, which is going to take us into the next century. We believe it's very state-of-the-art, a very effective system. Just to give you some idea on our merchandising scale, so we have about 10,000 W-2 employees. We acquired a company called RMSI in late 2016. And prior to that, 2015, the hours, we spent about 3.6 million hours merchandising products at retail. 44% was at magazines, and 20% was books. We do that for a company we work with called Readerlink. Last year in 2017, magazines represented only 20% of the merchandising that we do at retail. We're diversifying, we're growing, and we're doing other things to keep this engine going here at TNG. We do a lot of third-party merchandising work, and then RMSI is a company that does reset work overnight down the aisle at big grocery retailers. So that's kind of a look at our hours. And then there are headwinds, of course, that we see at TNG and challenges. But I'm a little more optimistic, and I think there are a number of reasons for that. The royal wedding we think is going to be large. We think we got behind some of the trends that we were cycling against in any retail, and Jerry will speak to this as well. And when you do something big at retail, you have to comp that the next year. That's very hard to do. If you have a Prince event that occurs, to comp that event the same week the next year is very challenging, very difficult on a top-line number on a year-over-year basis. We had something that occurred in the latter half of 2016, which was a phenomenon called adult coloring, and we sold unbelievable amounts of adult coloring magazines. So everybody says, well, you had a horrible year in 2018, the back half. Well, we're cycling against very strong numbers of adult coloring magazines the prior year. So in any context, when you look at numbers, I think everybody has to be careful to really look into the weeds and see what was driving that business when you're comparing yourself to the prior year. But obviously our challenges and concerns are the top line erosion of sale, same store. It's a very difficult trend right now. Just to point out, our Canadian trend is quite better, much improved versus what we're seeing in the US. And there are a number of reasons for that. Primarily the space hasn't been impacted as much as we've been impacted down here in the US. But the numbers we're seeing in Canada are much better. There's an expansion of grab-and-go candy and gum and mints and nuts and beverages and jerky, and that's all coming at the expense, a lot of it, of magazines at the checkout. Center store is shrinking, so center store would be the main part of the supermarket down the aisles, is shrinking because everybody wants to get to natural, organic, specialty, healthy, and ethnic, which are fresh areas, and those are growing, putting pressure on the space where our mainline displays are typically today, so that's a challenge. Our costs are rising, fuel's going up, insurance is going up, minimum wage inflation in states like California and Washington is out of control. We have a waste paper commodity that we sell. All of our waste paper, it fluctuates because it is a commodity. So it's something we have a very hard time predicting, but you can imagine if you're bringing back 75% of what you distribute and you're selling it as waste paper, it's an important component of our financials, but it is a commodity and it fluctuates in price. And it's come down a little bit as of late. We're in a high fixed cost business. We have a lot of warehouses and trucks. We need to get it to a variable model, which is what we're working on. And then we see title frequency reductions. So Dr. Oz cut frequency, that hurt us. And other titles are doing the same thing. You have fewer titles to distribute. The racks look light or empty, and it's a problem for retail. And then I think we see some apathy from the publisher side. On the front-end checkout programs, there's a cost to play at checkout at retail, and especially in the small and mid-sized chains, we see a lack of copy investment and a lack of funding participation. So we have a call to action. We think we have a great category with lots of excitement, and we just have to get that in front of the retailers at the right time in the right place, like we're seeing with the Royal Wedding and Selena, and we have a really good opportunity to continue to drive the magazine business at retail. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Dave. That was great. A lot to learn, a lot to think about. Okay, so now we have we've had the perspective of the data feedback company. We've had the perspective of the wholesaler and the retailer, and now we have the publisher. And we're going to start with Sebastian Raatz, who's the co-founder and publisher of Centennial Media. Come on up, Sebastian.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is Sebastian Raatz. I'm the president and co-founder of Centennial Media, and Centennial is a startup, not the kind of startup that disrupts the taxi industry or the hotel industry. Quite different, actually. What we do is we put ink on paper, ship that to retail stores, and that's where we sell it. That's all we do. We're a newsstand magazine publisher, proudly so. We don't do any subscriptions. We don't do any advertising. We have no digital presence. Deborah is gone, but I think when she said a publisher without any Twitter accounts, she was talking about us. Sorry she left. I'm going to share my thoughts on three different things with you today, and that's all through the small publisher lens. And then after me, Will Michalopoulos is going to speak and talk to you about, the view from a large-scale publisher. I'm going to talk to you about a little bit, and we've heard a lot about this, about the right type of mindset that is helpful to operate in an overall declining industry. The second thing I'm going to talk about is if you want to diversify away from print, where does it make sense to diversify? And the last thing then is who's our customer, really? When we talk amongst each other, especially a newsstand publisher, this is kind of the sense you're getting a lot of the times. We're bemoaning the industry, and we're talking about how tough it has become. And I think part of the reason we're so hyper aware of it and talk about ourselves and about the decline of the industry so much is because the media industry is the media industry, and the media industry likes to write about the media industry. No other industry has that. Coal mining industry is not the media industry. The coal mining industry doesn't write about the coal mining industry. They mine coal. But the fact of the matter is it's actually very normal to operate in a declining industry. I would venture out and say a very large percentage of the American population works in a declining industry. A very large percentage of business owners own businesses in a declining industry. But if I asked any one of you, would you like to own a cable TV provider? I would have to tell you, you might be making $6 billion a year instead of $7.5 billion. But you want it? Anyone? Oh, okay. So, declining industries, when we talk about ourselves, it almost sounds like it's, shameful to be in a declining industry. And Deborah actually said it very well when she said, if we always talk about print is not dead, the more, you talk about the enemy, the more credibility you give to the enemy. I was on this stage last year, and I'll tell the story again. In 2007 or 2008, I was watching TV, and there was a commercial for Saturn. For the students here, Saturn used to be a car brand. There was a commercial for Saturn on TV, and I still can't believe it. I looked it up on YouTube just last week, and it's still there. They really said this. You see a car driving on the highway, a Saturn, and the voiceover was, we're going out of business next year, but guess what? We're still around. Do you want to buy a Saturn now? So when I tell my 2.5-year-old, Annie, don't drop that bowl of yogurt, sure enough, that ends up on the floor. So there's a problem with telling people not to talk about something without, talking about not to talk about it. But that certainly is part of our, part of the problem, I think. The more we talk about it, the more it becomes true. It perpetuates the whole thing, and that's why I'm going to stop talking about it right now. Because there are, record industry is obviously a tough industry to be in, but vinyl sales are going up. For 7 years in a row, they've experienced double-digit growth. So who would have thought, right? 81 was the peak. I'm not telling you wait another 35 years and maybe the industry is going to turn around, but it's a $1 billion industry. It's not the oil industry, but that's, if you're a provider, if you own a business in that industry, and you're a mid-sized provider, that probably will buy you a nice condo in Central Park South or a house here in downtown Oxford, since the prices have gone up so much there. A declining market can actually be a really beautiful breeding ground for a growing business. And I put the slide in here because it's extremely true and real for myself. We started Centennial at the end of 2016. We've been in business for about a year and a half. And it's a wonderful business. We're growing fast. We're a startup. We have everything that a startup in Silicon Valley has, which is people roll up their sleeves, you work hard. Every day you're just sprawling with ideas. There's a real, sense of we can do this. And within the confines of our offices, I don't think anyone's ever brought up the term decline or declining industry ever. We just don't talk about it. And that's not by design, it's just because we don't care. So in a way, our business would not be in business today if this industry wasn't declining. Because industry decline can actually help you, determine what works, what not, and what doesn't work. It sharpens your senses. It makes you look all that harder for where the nuggets are. As Samir likes to say, if you can Google it, it doesn't belong in a magazine. I think big part of the declines we've seen actually are exactly that. It's stuff that now just has, I don't need to buy the Wall Street Journal to look up what General Electric stock price was yesterday. So there's just that utility portion that's gone. And that used to be a large part of the publishing industry. When you talk to veterans, that may now be in retirement, and you talk to them about what was publishing like in the 80s and 90s, and it was easy. It was like printing money. So maybe it was a little bit too easy, actually. I have never talked to anyone above the age of 60 who made a fortune in publishing that didn't tell me it was like printing money. That's what they all say. It's easy. It's just you turn on the printing press and you print money, and then you take it home. I'm overdoing a little bit, but that's the sense I'm getting. So as Deborah said in her speech this morning, you find that one thing, or the multiple things that are unique properties. Coloring magazines, yes, the hype is over, but coloring magazines actually have a very unique property. That is, you take a crayon or a pen and you color on that paper. You're not going to buy that on the App Store. You're going to buy it in a physical store. So that's kind of how we think about our product. We try to just create a product that has a unique property that should live in print. And the way we think about it in those terms is focus on the business, ignore the market. I know that's a bit of a contrarian statement, and I'm gobbling up everything you guys have said. Those were great talks, and I'm very passionate about retail, Jerry. So everything you have to say, I always wonder, like, if I was a student here, would I be this? But this is my bread and butter. I want to know everything about the retail industry. But in a way, when you're a company, if I was Gardner & Gunn or any of these economists, do I really care how the industry is faring if I'm doing this well, if I'm able to be this successful? And that's maybe more a message to all the students here who, I've heard some great pitches already yesterday and today about the final projects that you guys have worked on. There are some really, really great magazine ideas there. And that could easily turn into very profitable businesses. So no matter what we tell you about the overall market conditions, it almost doesn't matter if you focus on the business and the consumer and the customers in order to provide a great product. And if everyone was doing this, that doesn't mean we don't want to know what the market numbers are. I always want to know what the market numbers are, but it doesn't inform my decision making. My decision making is purely focused on the people that I deliver my product to, and that'll bring me to who my customers are and who we should view as customers later on in the presentation. So focus on the business, ignore the market. Some people might disagree with me on that, and then I want to hear from those people later on. Second part of this presentation is about diversification. Now, in portfolio theory, if anyone of you students takes any financial or business classes, you know that a diversified dollar is worth more than an additional dollar in your core business. It makes perfect sense. If you have $2 in one bucket and that bucket falls off the table, it's gone. If you have two buckets, you're less likely to lose it all. So diversification is a good thing. What I'm questioning, though, is since most publishers view digital as the logical step for diversification, is that really the right way to go for everyone? Some companies have been very successful expanding into digital or mobile or podcasting or video, whatever it might be. But there's a real competency trap, and that is That's the wrong slide. This slide. You need different people to do online well. You need a different organizational architecture. You need completely different processes and routines. You have to breed a different culture. In essence, you have to create a whole new company. Now, that's possible to do. Some have done it. Most print publishers have failed at it. And why is that? Because there's so much going on that you have to do differently that we just don't know how to do. And what I would equate that to is, if you're a horse-drawn carriage maker in the early 1900s, what qualifies you to produce an automobile? Carl Benz came around, invented the automobile. Henry Ford, mass-produced it. You make horse-drawn carriages. What makes you the best automobile maker? It doesn't really make sense to me. So what that is supposed to mean is the industry that disrupts you is necessarily the industry you're most qualified to succeed in. The industry that disrupts you isn't necessarily the industry you're most qualified to succeed in. So if you make horse-drawn carriages and some guy somewhere in Germany comes up with a horse-drawn carriages without horses, whatever that is, I don't know how that's going to work, but someone came up with it. You're already working with wood. You're making these things on wheels. They're made of wood and other materials. They're very sturdy. They withstand the weather and the dirt. Maybe you're a good furniture maker. That might make more sense than making automobiles. And that leads me to our biggest trade secret, so all competitors in the room, earmuffs. We as Centennial, the way we like to think about digital expansion is, never say never, but we like to say probably never. And the reason is we think we're much more likely to become a greeting card company than to do anything online. And the reason for that is, if you think about greeting cards, and that's just one example pulled out of thin air, it's ink on paper. There's different paper varieties, so you choose the paper. It goes on a truck. It's taken to a store. There's consumers in the store that look at it and like, oh, this one looks nice, and I'm emotionally touched by it, so I'll purchase it. And then there's also unsold inventory, and that goes back, and something has to happen with that. So essentially, greeting cards are like magazines, just with fewer pages. So what makes me, the competencies as a print publisher that I have accumulated over the years, what makes me more qualified to succeed against Facebook and Google or against BuzzFeed versus a greeting card company? Earmuffs off. And I think what's important is, and that really works for us, intensity beats extensity every time. So right now, and probably for a long time to come, we're going to focus 100% on this one business that we believe we can do very well and can succeed in, and that is produce beautiful printed publications and distribute them at retail. And something that, I hope proves my hypothesis a little bit, there was an extensive research study done by Deloitte. It's the biggest study of its kind. They really wanted to find out, of all the companies that have come and gone, and of those that are still around, what determines the long-term success of a business? Why are some businesses around after 100 years and others disappeared after 20 or 25 years? And they surveyed, they analyzed hundreds of companies, small, medium-sized, large, and they looked at all sorts of factors, liquidity, financing, people, what industry they were in, and they were only able to find 3 rules. And those are: make things better before you make them cheaper, revenue before cost, and there's no other rules to be found that would apply to all these businesses. This study, when I read this, I've read it a bunch of times. It's a white paper. Just Google it. Deloitte, 3 rules. It's really illuminating. They have all the data there too. Or email me. I'll send you a link to the white paper. That has been hugely influential for me in the way I choose the business that I operate in. And then I expect to hear back from at least at least from you, I would expect to hear back. Read it and let me know how you would apply, or what do you think about this, the findings of that research study applied to our industry. So that brings me to my third part of the equation, or of the presentation, who's our customer. Typically in the magazine industry, we always think of readers as our customers. And readers are important, but for Parents Magazine, for example, readers, Liz, you establish this large audience, and you serve them well, and they love your brand and your product. But when you drive home and bring groceries home, that money came from the advertisers mostly. So really, advertisers are your customers. Since we're talking about retail and newsstand here, the way we think about our business, our readers are not our customers. Our customers are, and I'm not saying that because you guys are sitting here, our customers are retailers and wholesalers and distributors. And if we're able to make them happy, everything takes care of itself. And too often in the industry, we see, when you think of the reader as your customer, well, if that's the customer and there's a wholesaler and a retailer in between, well, they're the obstacle, right? You kind of have to get around them or get through them, or to get to what you think your customer is. Well, if retailers and wholesalers are your customers, you can open up a whole different conversation. And that's when it comes to value creation versus value capture. And Will is going to really delve into some good examples of, what's that? Time?
15 minutes total to go, so it's still here.
Well, this is my last slide. When it comes to value creation, the more value we create as an industry, the more value there's to capture for everyone. So instead of a tug of war, I encourage you to listen to Will's presentation. It'll be very, very good. I just have one final thought. Sorry, this is the final slide. I have one final thought on the utility of passion. So I was picked up by a wonderful student yesterday at the airport in Memphis, and on the drive down, half the drive down, we talked about Shark Tank. So we're a nation of Shark Tank viewers, right? And the more we listen to Barbara and Mark talk about passion, I think the more of an identity crisis we all get ourselves into of, is this the industry I want to work in? Is this the product I want to work on? I had that identity crisis myself a few years ago. Am I really that passionate about magazines? And the answer was, no, I'm really not. So I was trying to figure out why do I enjoy working so much? And I know I'm not alone, because when I was listening to a podcast with the founder of Zappos, he couldn't care less about shoes. He owns 2 pairs of shoes. Meanwhile, he disrupted the entire shoe industry because he's passionate about customer experience. So what I would encourage all students to think about, and what I've found for myself, is find those passion points, and they don't have to be the product or the industry you work on. For me, it's retail, seeing a magazine the way it's displayed at retail, and what does that mean for retail dollars? How does it convert? Or accounting. I love accounting. I mean, I could stare at our P&L all day long if I had the time for it. Or I'm a typography nerd. I've recently gotten to slap serif, so you'll see a lot more slap serif fonts on our covers going forward. It's like, all these little passion points that I can't wait to get to the office in the morning. But it's not because I'm particularly interested in reading magazines. That's not my passion. But it's a lot of little things along the way that help me be extremely passionate about the process of making magazines, of distributing them, of selling them, that help me have a lot of fun in my job. That's it.
Thank you.
Thanks very much, Sebastian. Could you just take 20 seconds and tell us exactly what you publish? I don't think you described that.
Yeah, that's going to take 20 minutes probably, because we've published so much at this point. So we publish a bunch of SIPs as one segment that we operate in. We have a few regular frequency titles also. And in terms of segments, we're in home, decorating, food, family, history, current events, entertainment, activity, what else? and a few others.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, last act. I promise to try to close the loop on this. Hi, everybody. I think the way it laid out, I think we'll be able to close the loop. I'll talk, basically touch on everything that all the other speakers did and really try to bring it home with what we're kind of doing on at PubWorX. PubWorX, joint venture between Condé Nast and Hearst. We're basically the consumer marketing arm for both companies, but we also have some really distinguished clients as like Trusted Media Brands, Entrepreneur. Very fortunate to actually launch Alta magazine that was spoken earlier about. So that's me, Will Michalopoulos. I head up the retail group. So I'm going to kind of take a look at touching on what we just heard and then dive into some things that we've tried to do that have actually really worked at Newsstand in this very tough environment. We know consumers are making fewer trips, but in some ways now there's more trips, but they're called fill-in trips, and really the customers going in and out. They're not, you know, they're getting in, they're getting what they want, and they leave. The time in the store is down. They're sticking to a shopping list. Basically, ever since the recession, buying patterns have completely been altered. Discretionary spend is down, but it's improving. Magazines are at the top of the list. There's nobody that's putting, when they go to the store, they're not putting People magazine or whatever title it is they like on their list. It's all impulse. Millennials, they're not in bricks and mortar. Shopping is not an event like it used to be. And again, we've talked about it, and I'll touch on it, continued growth of online shopping for home delivery and shop from home as well. You know, I think creating opportunities at retail, it was touched upon. Understand the retailer's needs, their strategies and goals. I can't emphasize this enough. I think, you know, at the core, I'm a marketer. I deal with a lot of the major retailers on behalf of all the clients. I think that's really, really critical to understand what they need. You can't just do cookie cutter approaches to your promotions and what you're doing in store. Create exclusives, packaging, combined product offers, discounts, store events. I think all of these things are ways that you can create something different for each retailer. Sebastian touched on it, creating value for the consumer, and that doesn't mean it's the lowest price. It means something that the consumer feels they're getting value in return for what they're buying, and I'll give you some examples of that. Loyalty programs are huge, trying to touch into that, and all this, anytime you talk to any retailer, it's getting a shopper back into the store. That's what they want. They want repeat buyers to come in and spend as much as they possibly can. Creating or expanding shop at home. Hearst is touching into this. We're still in the infancy, but I think you really, since there's less people in the store, this is really a place where you have to focus and try to develop. Mobile applications is part of that, and then developing an online shopping and click and collect capabilities. Did I go backwards? And how are we doing that? Introduce new product. We've heard about all the launches, all the new product, all the bookazines. That's vital to keeping, titles have life cycles. We have to introduce new product. We'll talk a little bit about that. Repurposing content, like we said, for the bookazines. Driving multiple purchase. I'll give you some examples of that. And creating co-branded offers with magazines and their advertisers. We talked about this shrinking space and in the store. Disrupt the consumer before, during, and at the end of a shopping experience. You can't just wait till they're at the checkout. We know they're going in and out. Try to find other ways to get your product displayed. And again, reaching the consumers not in the store and utilizing everything a publisher has, whether it's email, whether it's social media, anything you can do to drive sale. And then leverage retail reach with branding. I'll give you a campaign that Hearst worked on. What is going on here? Hearst has been really the leader. Last year we were here, we heard about Magnolia. Unbelievable story. One of the great launches in the last couple of years. Hearst has really been a leader in introducing new product. And all of these launches are post-recession. So it just shows that if you come up with the right product. And one thing that you will find in all of these is a common theme. Hearst has done a very good job is the partnership. Everyone is a partnership with a company or an entity that had an existing audience. Starting with Food Network, HGTV, Dr. Oz, Airbnb. We just heard about the Pioneer Woman. I'll have a slide. And now Hearst is a little late to the program, but they have a whole lineup of bookazines coming in. Every one of those titles, it's interesting, became a category leader. Within a year, they were a category leader. Some of them are now in that cycle. They've plateaued and they're starting to come down. But every one of them surpassed every book that was in that category and became the category leader. Pioneer Woman, you heard some stats on it. It's phenomenal. The initial issue was Walmart exclusive. Believe me, there were a lot of retailers I heard from that were not happy about that. There was a lot of pressure, a lot of the wholesaler as well. The pressure was heard. We actually went back to press on issue 1, similar to Magnolia's story. And then we expanded. The pressure was heard, and we went nationally for issue 2. First issue sold about 75%. We more than doubled the draw, and we sold 75% on double the draw. It's phenomenal. And issue 3 is out now, and it's trending. We put out 700,000 copies, and it's trending very well. It'll probably be somewhere in between issue 1 and 2. Still early. And again, you're seeing some different displays that we did for this, for the magazine. Again, creating disruptive displays in store. I said Hearst a little late to the program, but they've committed to it in a big way. SIPs, 24 releases this year, up to 40 next year, using some of the iconic brands like other publishers have done. This is a way of using existing content that hasn't been used or repurposing. There's a ton, someone said it in one of their presentations, that there's a ton of information in an interview that gets cut at the end of the reel. It never makes it. That's what Hearst is going to try to do with these iconic brands, 3 different price points. We work with Condi. They've been doing them for using their iconic brands, 25 releases, price points $12 to $14.99, a very strong retail business. Domino and Dr. Oz, I should just point out, they were regular frequency titles. Those are 2 titles that it's a real good example of the difference between consumer demand and advertising demand. Dr. Oz was selling over 230,000 copies an issue, but they couldn't get the advertising. They go to a quarterly, raise the price, retail dollars are extremely strong, and the advertising's better. Domino's the same thing, does extremely well now as a quarterly. So driving multiple purchase. I think I have some expertise in this, and I'll share a few of the things that I've done. And the one in the middle is actually one of our client publishers. So driving multiple purchase. This was kind of, oops, sorry. The one on the left is kind of the old-fashioned way. We've put a display in 4 of our different titles, buy 2, get $2 off. Retailers are now embracing it, and the display on the right was actually one of the first done in Barnes & Noble, and it's the entire Trusted Media Brand Specials line for the holidays, all holiday cooking. Some of the titles we experienced 40% lifts over the same issue prior year, and all in the system now. So they custom signed it, all the display is there, it was just merchandising them together. And retailers are embracing this more and more. Polybag program. This is, I would probably say Meredith was probably the first with this, but Hearst has done a lot with it, and I was kind of one who pushed this along when I was with Hachette, who Hearst bought, and there was a lot of editorial similarities with some of the titles, like Hachette had Elle, they had Harper's Bazaar and Marie Claire. Basically what we did is we polybagged liked editorial themes, and we were able to go into chains we weren't going into. Chains like Costco. Women's Day at a $2.79 cover price would never cut it in Costco, would never make the retail number they need per week. By polybagging Women's Day, Good Housekeeping, and Red Book, you have an $8.99 price point. It's now a top 20 title. We put every single issue in. We actually do a House Beautiful and Elle Decor. There's a bunch of different variations on that. And the one on the left was a co-publisher. We did it with Hearst and Trusted Media Brands. Family Handyman and Pop Mechanics. Big thing is, Pop Mechanics has a nice distribution into airports. Family Handyman, #1 in Lowe's and Home Depot, which Pop Mechanics did not. So they both gained incremental distribution by polybagging them together, and then we figure out the financials afterwards. This is actually one of ideas I'm kind of proud of. It's come up. Samir has actually covered it before. This was, we had some stats from Barnes & Noble that said the fall fashion issues, biggest issues of the year, Vogue, very competitive on the advertising side. You know, Hearst has Marie Claire, Harper's, and Elle. 85% of purchases were single issue. No one bought, very few bought both of them. So how do we drive that? And we came up with this prototype. It was called Full Fashion to Go. 3 magazines in a box, and it was limited production, and we did it for Barnes & Noble and Hudson, and did extremely well. We were very close to getting sponsors. This one ran its course. We did it about 3 years. We were trying to get a sponsor, never did, and so we've since, last year we finally was the last year of it.
What was the price point?
It started at $15.99, but as they raised the price, it finished at $17.99. We actually did a pallet display in 50 Costco stores. We sold a lot of copies, but you have to put so many in that it just didn't P&L out. So, and the box cost about $3.50 to produce. But you know, they loved it. It was a unique thing at the time. They took it as soon as we showed it to them. They took it. They wanted it as an exclusive. And then it's shopper marketing. You know, this has become very big. This is another thing. It was very hot a couple of years ago, but now the Kroger meeting, I understand it's a hot topic again. And it's really connecting powerful brands, magazines, and other products that advertise in them. And here's a few that Hearst has done. The top one was is Harris Teeter, when it's used as sampling. Food Network has a brand of wine and twine. They did a co-branded display, buy the magazine and the wine, get $3 off. The one below it is Cosmo and L'Oreal. And then they also did Cosmo and, what was that? Vitamin Water. And every one of these double-digit lifts for both products. And the good thing is the advertiser pays for most of the display. It's driven by the advertiser. Again, creates a disruptive display in store. It's in a different place from where the magazines are, and connects 2 very strong brands. We were just talking about vinyl. This is really neat. This was one, Elle does a Women in Music issue every November. And I went to B&N, and I was able to get the artists in advance, and a lot of them are indie artists. They're not real mainstream. We were able to get the artists to Barnes & Noble in advance, and they highlighted them all in vinyl, and the magazine was displayed in the music section. Exclusive for Elle, covered all of this, and there was also a drive to purchase, talking about using all your assets. They emailed their loyalty members about where it would be, and about the artists that were covered, and Elle used it in their social media as well. Big lifts and sale in this as well. Only in the stores, obviously, that had music, which is about, I think it's about 1/3 of them. And then finally, I'll give you an example of this is We Are Fashion, last 2 years, Hearst major branding campaign. Advertising driven, but we connected it with the retail. And this is, you know, the 3 big fashion books plus Town and Country. And just to give you an idea, it was targeting magazine buyers at point of sale, reaching the influencers in Fashion Week, during Fashion Week, and then reinforcing key fashion titles to the consumer. So you see, it was on urban panels, billboards, city newsstands, this creative, all over New York. They even had a double-decker bus that was driving around, taxi tops, and even airport signage, not within the retail, within airports they were doing it. Bottom line, 743 million impressions out of this. And then we extended it into retail. Here's Hudson News, using the same creative, purchase cover display. The magazines were displayed in all of their New York stands. We actually did their digital plasma screens, the same creative that rolled through constantly for the 3 weeks. And we did 250,000 bags with the We Are Fashion campaign on the bags just for New York during Fashion Week. And at B&N, we ran the same creative on their Nook screens constantly and did the display. That's when we used the We Are Fashion on the fashion box. So tied the whole thing in, and huge lifts. Barnes & Noble, 15% units up across all 4 titles, and 30 points better than the national trend. Hudson, very similar, 10 points up, 25 better than the national trend. So these things work, you know, when they're executed properly. I think that's it. Amazon, single copy test, real quickly, trying to get to people not in the stores. Just finished a test October through December. There were 30 titles in total. I believe there were 10 Hearst titles, yes, participating. We've tested before having magazines on Amazon. If you don't promote them, no one's looking for them. This all happened through their metrics at the end of the shopping purchase when you were adding to cart. If you were buying this cold cream right up there, they gave you an offer of Allure, Harper's Bazaar, and I believe that's Women's Health or Health Magazine. Men's shirts, you got Esquire or GQ. The numbers are small. It was a small test cell. The sell-through numbers were very good. Amazon's actually very pleased with it, and we're actually having brainstorming meetings on how to possibly scale this larger. But this is, you know, here's a way of single copy trying to get to people that aren't in the stores that are online. And Meredith, Time Inc. have been doing this quite a while. Hearst and a number of other publishers are on Cartwheel. This one's a little trickier. This is their discount mechanism. It's now been incorporated into the regular Target app. Basically, it just offers on discount. The problem, we continue to be a good partner and try to figure out with this. There doesn't seem to be any correlation with if you do 10% off, 20% off, what's the right number? And it's hard to find if they seem to be some residual impact. We don't know. What we don't know is, are they using this and just getting the discount, or are we driving incremental sale, or are we just giving discount to someone who would have bought the magazine? But again, we have our fingers in this one as well. And that's it. I went really quick. I hope that was helpful. It kind of brought everything together.
Yes. One quick question.
Yes, sir.
The Amazon.
Yes.
What data do you get? Do you get their email address?
No, we don't. We do not.
Yeah.
We do not. No.
The single copy.
No, we do not.
Thanks
We're still believe me, it's infancy. The numbers were much better. We actually tested those poly bags just on during Halloween inside. Unless they're promoting it, it will not drive any sales.
Just curious, what was the marketing budget for the Wheel Fashion?
It was pretty big.
Yeah.
And it did not come out of the newsstand. It's a brand, I'm not making any, I'm not trying to make this up. This was an advertising-driven campaign, but we used it as an opportunity to tack it into the retail side in New York. We took advantage of that. There was a separate budget for that. Good?
Thanks, Will. And thanks to Dave, Jerry, Sebastian, and Ray. You guys did great. And I think we're up for a break, but Samir will take it from here. Give the panel a round of applause.